Good morning. Hey, everybody. The next type of writing we're going to talk about is narration. So please read the narration chapter for Monday and take the quiz. On Thursday, you'll turn in your final draft of the cover letter and the resume. Any questions about what is coming up? So the narration chapter tells you how to communicate with a story, and stories are really powerful ways to connect with people in writing. The narration chapters in your book. So you've already read the first chapter on reading techniques and audience and brainstorming. So now you're going to read the narration chapter about storytelling. So I want to discuss one more important thing about audience. Universal themes, right? We all have different stories and experiences, but there are things about human beings that don't change, right? There are connections that we share, emotions, food, life, death, love, war, So I'd like to show you a video to provoke some thought and see how they connect with people. I personally think the United States should take this and do some version of public service announcements with it. We'll see. Let me share my screen here. So this is an advertisement from Denmark. It's in English, mostly. Subs are. So let's watch it and then we'll discuss it.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark, all that we share.
Okay, thoughts? Do you think they did a good job? What they were responding to is there had been a lot of immigrants coming into Denmark, and there was some divisions that were being created. And so this was an ad campaign that was in response to that. What universal themes did they touch on? Okay, unity. How did they show the unity? Love, right? If you're a human being, then most of us have experienced love for our families, love for someone else, significant other, support. Yeah, because it brought people who had something in common together in a group. Laughter, right? That's a great universal thing about people and cultures. One of the best. Do you think it achieved its purpose? Like, were they considering their audience? Yes. What did it make you feel? It is one of my favorite ads, no matter how many times I watch it. I mean, is it an idea that we like? The idea that we all have things in common? Yeah. It's a good reminder. What part did you like the most? The guy who had to go out there by himself? Yeah, that would have been challenging. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they showed they supported him, which was pretty cool. It must have been hard to be in that group who admitted they bullied people. That's another thing I think that probably took courage. And you can see that boy who was really affected by the idea that he had done that. Self-reflection. Any other parts? Yeah, it was kind of wholesome. Mallory, I'm just catching your comment up here. It's a critical thing to remember about writing too, that it's sometimes you're communicating with people who are very different from you in terms of like even the language that they speak. But the kind of cool thing about human beings is even if somebody doesn't share my culture, doesn't share my language or my life experience, there are things they understand about me based on us being human. And that is a great way to connect with people. Excuse me. Because if you can find the things that you share and establish that sort of common ground, they're much more willing to listen to your message, whatever that message might be. So even if, you know, your experience going to school was vastly different from theirs, you know, we kind of all have the, oh, my teacher's making me do this thing. Yes, I am the teacher making you do this thing. All of the things that we share around the world that are universal can help you communicate better, even people who don't quite have the same experiences that we do, right? And to be able to see that, to be able to empathize, to be able to realize that that person is not just other, helps you to find ways to communicate with them. So remember that when you're writing, that even though you might have an experience that's unique. So for example, I had someone who wrote an essay about like selling their first car and how conflicted they were about letting it go, but it was time to move on. And, you know, so they were reflecting back on all the memories they have. Well, maybe you didn't have the same thing. Maybe you didn't have a first car, you know? But because we are all nostalgic as human beings, they were able to connect with us because we know what it's like to have to give something up, right? Or to have memories attached to an object, even if you don't have to necessarily give it away or sell it. So always ask yourself, you know, what are the universal themes attached to your writing? I mean, even for things like this cover letter and the resume, you know, people respect certain things that you need to provide for your family. The company needs people who are going to help them be successful. So, you know, you can keep those kind of underlying sort of themes in mind when you're writing. Okay. I'll post the link to the ad because a lot of people ask for it after we watch it. Hold on a second, but I'll also put it here in the chat in case you want to copy it. And if you came in late, I really recommend that you watch it. So here's the link. But just ask yourself, you know, whatever kind of writing that you're doing, what are the universal things that connect you with your audience? And how can you highlight that connection in a way that helps them get your message? Okay. Which will be important when we get to the storytelling here coming up. Okay, so always be aware of the universal themes. And it's all part of that thinking about what someone else has experienced and what they need to know and what they need from your piece of writing. All right. We'll talk more about this as we go. Now I want to talk about the next stage of writing. So we've talked about the pre-writing stage, right? We've talked about drafting, writing your shitty first draft. Now you guys are working on revision. So let's take a look at revising. So these are the things that we've covered so far in the stages of writing. And now we're going to talk about revising, which is what you're doing for Thursday. And with this one, you're not going to have as much space to add things, but you still can make your writing better by keeping these things in mind. I get a lot of questions about, I'm really worried about making my paper 3 pages long or 4 pages long or 8 pages long, whatever the assignment calls for. So people tend to add more words instead of more ideas. You don't want to do that. You want to add content without subtracting points, because if your paper's full of fluff, it's going to affect your grade negatively. So you need to add the things that need to be there. And so there are 3 things that you can add, okay, that we're going to talk about. You can add descriptions of things, you know. So for your jobs, you can describe your jobs in more detail. So you can look and see, is there anything I forgot to add that I did at my job, any duties that I had that I can expand on in my resume. Examples, give me an example of something that you did successfully at work, whether it was increase sales or organize something or successfully deal with a customer, okay? If you can add something personal like a story into your cover letter, it tends to stand out more, okay? And then the last thing, and this is the thing that people get, they leave out the most, which is explanations of your thinking. And it goes back to that connecting with people. If you don't explain how you view the world, I may look at the same information and have a totally different take on it. Okay. So for example, we can both watch the same television program and have totally different responses. You might love it, I might hate it, or vice versa. So what you have to do is explain your thinking. Why do I love it? What bugs me about it? Why did I like this movie and you hated this movie? Okay. So you have to explain your thinking in in order to communicate effectively, because we do look at the world in a lot of different ways. One example is usually too little to illustrate a concept. For your cover letter, since you're keeping it brief, one example will probably get it done. But when we move on to telling stories and explaining things, you're going to need multiple examples. Okay. Rarely, I don't think I've ever told somebody they had too many examples. So it's a way of fleshing out what you're thinking and showing us versus telling us. So you can tell me you're a great employee, right? How are you going to show me that? You know, that they always transferred calls to you if they had a difficult customer because you could make them happy, or whatever it was. You're going to give us examples that show how that thing looks in real life. So this is the stage you're working on next. We're going to talk about editing too at the end of the week, but for right now, we're talking about revising. Okay. So how do I add descriptions of what I did in my job? How do I add a specific example that shows that I'm, good at what I do? So explain your thinking. So you handled a difficult customer. What is the approach you take? Explain the thinking that goes into wanting to make the customer happy. So I always focus on figuring out what it is they need and try to fulfill that need. And that gives them insight into your process and why you're successful. Okay. So these are the things now that you've got your draft. These are the things you want to focus on adding to really flesh out your writing and make us see what it is that you want to say. Okay. So everybody take a couple minutes and think of one example in which you did something successfully that's going to help sell you as a good employee. It doesn't matter if it's from a formal job or an informal one, something you did at home versus, babysitting versus just a time when you were successful. Write a few sentences that explain the example. Okay. Tell us what it is. Describe it. And then post it in the chat. That way we can see some ideas, and maybe you guys can come up with ideas to help each other. Like, oh yeah, I have an example similar to that I could put in my cover letter. Okay. So show me. Devin, excellent. Yeah, that is something specific that an employer can look at, that you always were there. They don't have to worry about relying on you. Now, why was that important to you? So explain your thinking about what makes that important to you. And that helps them see your philosophy as an employee also. Why did you work overtime to finish tasks? Yes, because you care about getting your work done. Yeah. And that is definitely something that I would put in your cover letter that can sell you to your potential employer. Attendance, yeah, punctuality, and dedication, all in a couple sentences, right? Those are great things to highlight. That's good. Can anybody else use that for their examples? Maybe working overtime. Ah, very good, Claire. You were always early for your shift. Yeah. And you'd cover other people's shifts. And then add a sentence about why you felt that was important. Okay, Annalie, you're a team player. You contributed to anything that was necessary. Yeah, because it was important to you to be a leader. Yeah, I would explain that, and that'll be a great thing to highlight. Leadership skills are important, and especially when nobody else is willing to help out. If you're willing to, that's always a good thing to know. These are really good examples, guys. Just going to summarize some of them. Yeah, Claire, you can just add a sentence like that. Said, as an employee, it's important to be successful in the job and fulfill others' expectations. So Maria, you go above and beyond. You have an example that you could give them to show them how there was a specific task that you took and did more than what was asked, because that would help show them. Yeah, exactly. And even if you don't have something from a job experience, you can also talk about your educational experience. Did you put more into an assignment? Did you go the extra mile? Maria always does what her boss asks, but she also finds something else to do. Like what? Like what if you could find a task like cleaning, or I'm not sure what your jobs were, or helping another employee? What do you think? Okay, so you go out of your way to like help a client or employee without being asked, right? If you see a need, you try to help out. That is a great thing for your employee to know, or your employer to know, and that gives them some insight, you know, because I mean, what do we all want out of our work environment? If you were an employer or an employee, what are some common universal things we all want out of the place that we work? I don't want somebody to stick me with all the work, right? Everybody doing their share? What do you guys think? What else? So feeling, you know, happy with your work, satisfied that you contributed. Yeah, we all want to work with people, you know, who are friendly. So that's another thing that you can sort of come across as in your cover letter, is that you're kind of an upbeat, you know, or just not a difficult person, right? So we tend to be happier if I ran into a problem and somebody helped me out, and you're the kind of person who helps out, like Maria was saying, if she sees a fellow employee who needs some help, you're the kind of person I'd want to work with, Maria, you know, because you're willing to help other people, and that makes the work environment better for everybody, you know. Yeah, I mean, we do get invested in a company's success, right? So come across as a reasonable person. Tone is another thing. We all want to go to work and feel like we're valued. Um, that people will support us. So you want to look at how can I show my employer that I will fulfill some of these needs that they have. Because these are things you don't necessarily think of putting in your qualifications, but it can really show them what kind of employee you will be. Anybody else have examples of things you can put in your resume? Examples of your work philosophy? Who haven't we heard from yet? Tristan, did you have one or did I miss it? It's okay if you can't think of one right now. But that's part of the process that goes into the revision. So if I had to give you one directive for revising is, how do I show instead of just tell? How do I show you that I'm a good employee, that somebody that you'd want to work with? You don't have one yet? Yeah. So, as I said, these things will go into your cover letter. But don't forget, you can also add sort of like summary things like punctual, responsible, those kinds of adjectives to describe yourself as well as the situation. Do not forget to explain why you are the way you are. Why do you help out other people? Because it makes for a better work environment if we all feel like we can get help, or because my mom taught me to be punctual, or, you know, have a good work ethic. Any questions about adding examples, descriptions, or explanations? Okay, a little preview of what we're going to be talking about coming up. We are going to be working also on editing, besides discussing more about revision. And editing involves making it pretty. So remember when I said in your shitty first draft you weren't worried about grammar, spelling, and punctuation? Well, now it's time to worry about choosing better words and making your writing flow and easy to read and interesting to read by virtue of the writing choices that you make in terms of structure, all of those good things. So we'll talk about editing, and we're going to start getting into how to tell stories. And I will open up the chat or the Zoom class after this for 10 minutes for anybody who needs help or has questions or just wants to discuss something further. Okay. So if you have questions, come back in and we can talk. All right. Otherwise, yeah. Okay. I like it, Maria. Yeah, if you explain that. So I'm going to end this session here. And anybody who needs to talk to me, please come back to the Zoom class. Have a good day.